Look, let's move on. I'm sure you're both listening to the interview I just had with Tony Abbott there on why a royal commission into the Bondi massacre is so needed. Here was what the Prime Minister had to say in response today.
That there was no royal commission called by the Howard government after Port Arthur. There was no royal commission called by the Abbott government after the Lindt siege.
Arthur gunman was a madman, and as Tony Abbott pointed out in my interview with him, after the Lindt Cafe siege, Tony Abbott called out radical Islam, and his leadership was strong on this. So how can the Prime Minister avoid a royal commission into the worst terror attack on home soil?
Well, that's right. And he can avoid it, but the Australian people will judge him accordingly. And quite frankly, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has proven time and time again over the past week and a half that he is weak and that he is a coward. This is the worst terror attack Australia has ever seen. We haven't, apart from what happened in Israel on the 7th of October 2023, this is the worst attack on a Jewish community worldwide. We have to have a royal commission into this. And more than that, we also need to look at precisely how this type of religious extremism and terrorism has been allowed to grow and to fester in Australia. We are one of traditionally the most tolerant, peaceful and safe countries in the entire world. So the very least that this Labor government can do is call a royal commission.
And Jason, Liberal Senator Dave Sharma quite rightly pointed out today that Anthony Albanese has supported royal commissions like the UN Oil for Food, child sexual abuse, the banking aged care sectors, disability, robo-debt, veteran suicide, but not the most deadly terror attack on our home soil. What do you make of the hypocrisy?
Yeah, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, doesn't it? I mean, Tony Abbott showed what leadership actually is when he was Prime Minister, and in that interview he just did with you, Danica, Anthony Albanese is demonstrating how in 2 years Australia has gone from one of the most peaceful, law-abiding countries in the world to hosting the second worst attack on an ethnic minority in the world of this century. So, I mean, no wonder he doesn't want a royal commission. And I think the truth of why he doesn't want a royal commission is because it would have to look at whether there were clear security failures by ASIS and ASIO, or whether that happened at the New South Wales Police Force level. He would have to look at the funding behind these groups that both enable and encourage and foster this hate and division. And he knows that the Sunrise Foundation gets a lot of its money from the same people, and they're the people who fund a lot of the union movement in Australia. And he knows that a lot of the groups that are operating on university campuses across Australia have very close ties to the union movement and to the Labor organisation, and he doesn't want any of that exposed. So he has to take the political hit rather than risking the truth being exposed.
Every time one of these things happen, everyone wants to tar the whole religion with the same brush of extremism, which we don't do with other religions when people do it in, if they're extreme Christians or Hindus or whatever it may be. It's not the same rule applied.
When he threw himself in the fire, he was thinking to himself, I am a Muslim or I am a Australian. He dropped his entire interest. He risked his life, his physical body, his future. The world accused Israel of committing genocide. Then so many false narratives were built on that theory that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. And that led to the hatred against the Jewish people. It led to the Sydney attack, to Manchester attack. And it will lead to more attacks. Many times I said falsehood will eventually lead to violence. False narrative of occupation, of genocide, of ethnic cleansing. Things actually don't exist in reality. There is a tragedy in Gaza. Nobody's celebrating this tragedy in Israel. No Israeli politician or citizen wanted to go into Gaza. It's not a fun trip. It's not a walk in the park. Israel, after the atrocity of October 7, had to send its best men to die in Hamas booby traps where they cannot even differentiate combatant from civilian, where the terrorists, jihadists, used their own people as human shields. So the outcome has been catastrophic. We understand this. But the world, instead of understanding Israel's position, what they did, they have been accusing Israel. They have demonized the Jewish people. And now they want to go after, in a Jewish hunt, after the Jewish people worldwide. And nobody's stopping them. They're going unchecked. What did they mean when they said globalize the Intifada from the beginning? They triumphed on October 8th. They celebrated the atrocities against civilians. And since then, they have been saying globalize the Intifada. What did they mean by globalizing Intifada? It means taking it to Sydney, take it to New York, take it to LA. Just the other day, the FBI exposed a plot targeting Los Angeles for plans to attack simultaneously at New Year's Eve. And they are affiliated with the pro-Palestine. They are not jihadists, they are not Muslims, they are leftists. But their ideology now is free Palestine and free Hawaii. This is what the FBI found with those guys. So the hateful indoctrination does not go in void, Pierce. This is what we need to understand.
In the end, this is not about a witch hunt. This is about making Australians feel safe. It's about making Jews feel safe. At the very least, call a royal commission seriously. I want to get your comments on this. Labor has today announced a tightening of travel regulations, of course.
The moment our Prime Minister was heckled at the Bondi Vigil arriving on Sunday has come to light. And this time it came from Hollywood actor Nate Buzz telling off Albanese for letting down Australia. Here was that moment.
Get out of here, Albanese! You might as well go to a jihadist nation where you can fit in. Shame on you!
Well, he certainly didn't hold back. I sat down with the Vampire Diaries star a little earlier to discuss that and his calls for a royal commission and more. Nate Buzz, it's great to see you again. Tell me, first of all, why you yelled at the Prime Minister and said what you said.
Well, I would say, why is not all of Australia yelling at this Prime Minister? He is clearly responsible, and the attack on a Jewish community during Hanukkah fell on his clock. And I think the last 2 years, he's had warning after warning after warning that the pro-Palestinian narrative that has been calling for violence on the Jewish community, they lived up to their promise and they lived up to their words. And Albanese is very aware of the language that they were using, and even more so, he understands what globalised the Intifada means.
There are now moves, at least by the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, to ban that phrase, globalise the Intifada. The government's going to look at its hate speech laws as well, but not sure whether they're going to be able to ban that slogan. Obviously, you support that. Is there anything else that you think should be banned?
Look, we need to get to the communities that are preaching this hate. We know it's online. It's available for everyone to see that, you know, Muslim community centres in Bankstown are preaching this hate. They're radicalising young Australians. And I think that's one of the most alarming things. This alleged shooter was born here. He grew up in Australia under the value system that we have, and he was radicalised in our country. So really, the first thing we need to do is find these imams who are preaching hate. We need to either put them in jail or we need to kick them out of our country if they don't belong here.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I told viewers earlier tonight that the Al Medina Dawa Centre has been closed today, finally, by the Canterbury Bankstown Council.
It's not enough, though. Closing down a building.
And why now?
Yeah.
And why now?
Yeah.
Only now?
Closing down a building is not enough. It's actually getting to the source of the problem, which are the people who are preaching this hate. Look, I had a next-door neighbour of mine who...
Because you grew up in southwest Sydney. A lot of people might not realise you're from that area.
I'm from that area. I know it very, very well. Blood has been spilled, so now the government either has to take accountability or they have to step down and let someone do the job who's going to protect everyday Australians.
I have for you, because you know a lot about this issue. You know both sides of the issue. You've lived on both sides of the issue. Here you had in Sydney a situation where a father and son had clearly become radicalised. They'd been in Australia for a number of years, since the early 2000s in the case of the father, seemingly living normal lives in the communities. One slight red flag with the son a few years ago, which the authorities, perhaps wrongly as it's turned out, concluded was not serious enough to warrant further investigation about who he was associating with. And then they become full-blown ISIS, banners in their car, and they go and attack any Jewish people they can target. But we also saw a Muslim go in and display extraordinary courage in stopping one of these assassins, and for his trouble getting shot up, and is now in hospital recovering, thankfully. And it raises, I guess, the complexity of this, which is there are 2 billion Muslims in the world, and there are 15 million Jews. So a massive disparity in the numbers there. But people keep telling me, a lot of Muslims agree with these Islamists. A lot of Muslims share this feeling, to which my instinctive response is, well, if that is the case, if even you had 10% of the world's Muslims who felt that way, that's 200 million people. So there would be these atrocities happening all the time, and they're not. And in fact, I would go further and say that about 80 to 90% of all the victims of Islamist terrorism are fellow Muslims, right? So it's not as straightforward as some people with their own agendas like to portray this issue. What do you feel about the reality here? How many of the Muslim population do you think share a hatred of Jews, for example? How many would have sympathy with Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis or ISIS or whatever it may be? What is the reality here? Because if it was hundreds of millions, I would just assume the whole planet would be in flames all the time, and it's not. And I feel very strongly for Muslim friends of mine that I know, that every time one of these things happen, everyone wants to tar the whole religion with the same brush of extremism, which we don't do with other religions when people do it in, if they're extreme Christians or Hindus or whatever it may be. It's not the same rule applied. So what do you feel about that?
First of all, speaking of a father and son, as you know, my father wanted me to follow his footsteps of becoming a Hamas terrorist, basically. And this is when I dropped that idea and I went against the interest of the family. On the other hand, I was born a Muslim myself. I studied Islam, I studied classic Arabic, I memorized huge portions of the Quran. I prayed to Allah 5 times a day. I was a devout Muslim. I was born in the mosque, literally in the mosque. I went to a Sharia school. I studied the Islamic law. But at some point, when I realized that it was a dead end, that it was leading to more violence, and that nothing could satisfy the Islamic ambition, I had to drop that Islamic identity. By the way, speaking of this hero in Sydney, him a Muslim, why? Because they have guilt. And especially the same crowd that has been demonizing the Jews and calling to slaughter the Jews, those are the ones who found opportunity to identify with heroism. They want it to be heroism when it's convenient, when it suits their narrative. But they did not see the other side, the killer, the embodiment of evil who was shooting civilians. They should actually identify with the other side, with the dark side, because this is the actual manifestation of their hateful indoctrination over the last 2 years. They have celebrated October 7th. Then they celebrated ballistic missile attacks on civilians in Israel, where they ran like it was insane to see that celebration against civilians and the indiscriminate attack against civilians. And many of them, by the way, back in the day also celebrated suicide bombing attacks. So now the thing is the problem is not with the Muslims. The problem is with Islam itself, with jihad itself. And jihad is a unique concept only to the religion of Islam. You cannot find it in Christianity.
No,
you
but
cannot find it in
but
Buddhism.
what I would say to that,
not in Hinduism.
Okay, but
please just let me finish.
Okay.
It's important. Please let me finish. So the thing is, the Muslims, the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful people. They don't want violence. This is the human nature. The human nature is against violence. This is what makes us different than the animals. But the problem, when Muslims identify with Islam, they give cover to the jihadists. And in many cases, they identify with something they completely oppose. And this is the identity crisis within Islam. And this is why I say to many of those peaceful Muslims who identify with Islam, and they could be in the hundreds of millions, who don't even know the Quran, who don't know the Islamic law, who don't know that they are actually required for physical and financial and social jihad. If they don't understand it, if they haven't gone to a Sharia school like I did, they go identifying because they think this is their ethnicity, but it's not.
Growing calls for a federal royal commission. So far, it's members of the coalition, but also now 2 Labor MPs who are calling for it, Ed Husick and Mike Freelander, and more than 100 former judges and senior barristers joining that call today. Do you want to see that happen?
Absolutely, but I can tell you exactly what the fine is going to be. Incompetence, incompetence, incompetence. Look, Albanese failed this country. He has failed the Jewish community, he's failed Australians, and Sunday is going to be a black mark on his legacy. I would be grateful if he actually did the first brave thing in his political career, which is to step down and remove himself from politics forever. Because what I'm seeing online is every Australian is absolutely fed up with the direction that this country is going, and he is fully responsible. He's the leader.
Peace to you all. My name is Saba Ahmed. I'm a law student at American University. I am here to ask you a simple question. I know that we portray Islam and all Muslims as bad, but there's 1.8 billion Muslim followers of Islam. We have 8 million plus Muslim Americans in this country, and I don't see them represented here. But my question is, how can we fight an ideological war with weapons? How can we ever end this war? The jihadist ideology that you talk about, it's an ideology. How can you ever win this thing if you don't address it ideologically?
Great question. I am so glad you're here, and I am so glad you brought that up because it gives us an opportunity to answer. What I find so amazing is since the beginning of this panel, which we are here about Benghazi attack against our people, not one person mentioned Muslims. We are here against Islam, or we're launching war against Muslims. We are here to discuss how 4 Americans died and what our government is doing. We were not here to bash Muslims. You were the one who brought up the issue about most Muslims, not us. And since you brought it up, allow me to elaborate with my answer. There are 1.2 billion Muslims in the world today. Of course, not all of them are radicals. The majority of them are peaceful people. The radicals are estimated to be between 15 to 25%, according to all intelligence services around the world. That leaves 75% of them peaceful people. But when you look at 15 to 25% of the world Muslim population, you're looking at 180 million to 300 million people dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization. That is as big of the United States. So why should we worry about the radicals, 15 to 25%? Because it is the radicals that kill. Because it is the radicals that behead and massacre. When you look throughout history, when you look at all the lessons of history, most Germans were peaceful. Yet the Nazis drove the agenda. And as a result, 60 million people died. Almost 14 million in concentration camps. 6 million were Jews. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Russia, most Russians were peaceful as well. Yet the Russians were able to kill 20 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at China, for example, most Chinese were peaceful as well. Yet the Chinese were able to kill 70 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Japan prior to World War II, most Japanese were peaceful as well. Yet Japan was able to butcher its way across Southeast Asia, killing 12 million people, mostly killed with bayonets and shovels. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. On September 11th in the United States, we had 2.3 million Arab Muslims living in the United States. It took 19 hijackers, 19 radicals to bring America down to its knees, destroy the World Trade Center, attack the Pentagon, and kill almost 3,000 Americans that day. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. So for all our powers of reasons and us talking about moderate and peaceful Muslims, I'm glad you're here. But where are the others speaking out? And since you are the only Muslim representative, save the applause till the end. Thank you. And since you're the only Muslim representative in here, you took the limelight instead of speaking about why our government, and I assume, are you an American? You're an American citizen. So as an American citizen, you sat in this room and instead of standing up and saying a question or asking something about our 4 Americans that died and what our government is doing to correct the problem, you stood there to make a point about peaceful, moderate Muslims. I wish you brought 10 with you to question about how we can hold our government responsible. It is time we take political correctness and throw it in the garbage where it belongs and start calling it.
He is fully responsible. He's the leader. So Albanese, if you're watching this, resign. Leave today and let someone who's actually going to take care of Australians lead this country and bring back the values that made this country the safest in the world. I mean, I've never seen so much gun violence in my life happening in Australia.
And you've been living in the United States for so long. I mean, it must be a shock to come home and this happening.
I'm shocked. There's random shootings in Croydon Park. There's gang shootings. There's Middle Eastern crime that's unfolding all over Western Sydney. And instead of actually getting on top of it, the Australian government is only tightening hate speech laws. And he's only targeting people that are opposing his political position. I don't think this government really cares about the issue, which is radical Islam that is unfolding in our country. Now, this is a global phenomenon. We're seeing this in the UK. We're seeing this in France. We're seeing this in Toronto. We're seeing this in America. This is not just an isolated event to Australia. This is a global problem that I think every Western nation is now starting to realize. We're either too far beyond it, or we've created such a political system that we have no rights to protect ourselves anymore.
Well, certainly a new skynews.com.au poll has found us that. Many people, many voters agree with you here that they're not confronting radical Islam. I want to ask about some of the stuff you've been doing behind the scenes that people don't really know about. Over the past 2 and a bit years, you've been meeting with families and victims of the October 7 terror attacks in Israel. But you've also been meeting over the past few days with a lot of victims and families of this attack in Bondi. You haven't been sharing photos or taking videos of this. You've just been doing it privately. But can you speak to us about what it's been like to meet with those families and victims?
Well, today we had a miracle. 4 days ago, I went to visit one of the survivors of the one of the survivors of the Bondi massacre. He was in a coma, and I prayed on the side of his hospital bed that we would see a miracle. Today he came out of that coma and I got to meet him, shake his hand. He's in good spirits despite everything he's been through. The Israeli, Geffen, who was also shot twice when he was assisting Ahmed El-Ahmed in that moment of time, which was unbelievable bravery. He's fighting for his life right now. And so I would make a public call to all people of faith in Australia and around the world that we need to pray for this young man. We need to see another miracle. And most importantly, I think we really need Australia to come back to godlessness. Godliness. We really need Australia to come back to godliness. This nation is losing what it was created for, you know, and the values and the cultures that we once celebrated, they're disappearing. You know, and I think that's been one of the saddest realities that I've witnessed over the past 2 years. This pro-Palestinian movement is eroding the Australian value system that made this country great. And they ultimately don't care about Australians. And
The investigation can reveal convicted terrorists are targeting the anti-Gaza war movement in an attempt to radicalise young Australians. They include convicted Islamic State terrorist Yusuf Uwainat, who was caught on camera forcefully confronting a fellow protester on the Sydney Harbour Bridge earlier this month. Uwainat was released less than 2 years ago after being jailed for encouraging Australian teenagers to carry out terrorist attacks. He was also seen at the protest waving a black flag associated with Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Uwainat attended the protest with notorious Sydney preacher Wissam Haddad, who recently identified by Four Corners as a spiritual leader of Australia's pro-Islamic State network. Mr Haddad was last month found to have breached the Racial Discrimination Act in a series of anti-Semitic lectures. ABC investigative reporter Sean Rubenstein-Dunlop has the story.
Well, Wissam Haddad is a notorious radical Sydney preacher. For most of his adult life, he's been monitored by ASIO, Australia's domestic spy agency, and he's also been a media figure for a really long time as well. There have long been concerns about him because at his prayer centres, he's hosted a stream of terrorists who've recruited young people into the global jihad, young people who went to fight in Syria, and young people who have either carried out attacks in Australia or been behind disrupted plots. And there are concerns now that Wissam Haddad is re-energising his network. He supports the Islamic State terrorist group, and he's been working with convicted terrorists who've been released from jail to rebuild and re-energise.
And Sean, the man flying the flag was someone who served 4 years in prison on terror offences. Who is this man?
Well, Yusuf Uwainat is a former youth leader at Wissam Haddad's prayer centre. And while he was working there as a youth leader, he was found to have actually been encouraging young people to carry out terrorist attacks. He was grooming teenage boys in secret chat groups, urging them to carry out suicide attacks, urging them to support Islamic State, sending them really gruesome videos as well. He was released from jail less than 2 years ago, and the federal government lodged a legal fight to have a supervision order imposed on him, a strict terrorism supervision order where his associations and movements would have been heavily restricted. But that failed in court, and now we can see in the vision from the bridge protest that he's reunited with Wissam Haddad, and he's targeting this movement with Wissam Haddad in an attempt to radicalise young Australians and push for an Islamic caliphate.
Sean, you asked Mr Haddad if he's trying to fracture the pro-Palestinian movement. What did he have to say about that?
Yeah, I sent Wissam Haddad a list of questions, and instead of responding to those, he sent his own questions back to me, asking if I'm a Zionist, asking if I'm a leader of what he described as a pro-genocide movement. He's previously rejected suggestions that he's a leader of a pro-ISIS network. I should say I've been covering this area for more than a decade, and Muslim community leaders and families are very, very worried about the influence that this man has over young people.
Are New South Wales Police looking into Mr Haddad and the man who flew the flag at the protest?
Well, they've been looking into Wissam Haddad for a very long time. He's one of the top counter-terrorism targets for ASIO and police in Australia, but never charged with a terrorism offence. New South Wales Police now say that they're considering legal advice about whether to charge people who flew these black flags at the Sydney Harbour Bridge protest under new anti-hate symbols laws, which carry a minimum 12-month jail sentence, really strict laws. But these flags, these black flags, are also common Islamic emblems. They're known as the Shahada flag, and they've been appropriated by terrorist groups. So Muslim groups warn that this could criminalise a sacred religious symbol.
Investigative reporter Sean Rubenstein-Dunlop reporting there for us. Thanks very much.
After the most personal of attacks.
I didn't see Penny Wong attend a single funeral. I haven't seen Penny Wong shed a single tear.
Today, Susan Lee refusing to back down.
I make no apology for my passion on that occasion and my ongoing passion for Australians.
I thought that was a disgusting element of an increasingly partisan pile-on in the wake of a national crisis.
The frustration and anger that Susan Lee is portraying is that of the Australian people in their Prime Minister, who has left them.
People will judge whether Susan Lee and others have been engaging in bipartisanship.
Whether bipartisanship will extend to tougher national gun laws is still in question. The Australian people's view appears clear. According to new polling, 76% want gun laws toughened, including 78% of coalition voters and 80% of Labor voters. After more talks with state ministers, today more details of what could be in new federal legislation.
There is goodwill still across all jurisdictions, and I think that's because it's backed so strongly by the Australian people.
The previously flagged gun buyback scheme, more intelligence sharing, import controls and offences relating to 3D printed guns, as well as fast-tracking a hate crimes database, the National Firearms Register and a list of groups that promote hate.
Organisations like Hizb ut-Tahrir and the neo-Nazis for a generation have managed to keep themselves just on the legal side of Australian law.
The real problem is not guns, it's extreme Islamic behaviour.
After the New South Wales Nationals branch voted against gun reform, David Littleproud told 9 News he would wait to see the full detail of the federal government's proposals before deciding whether to extend the hand of bipartisanship. Emily Saunders, 9 News.
Peaceful people. They don't want violence. This is the human nature. The human nature is against violence. This is what makes us different than the animals. But the problem, when Muslims identify with Islam, they give cover to the jihadists. And in many cases, they identify with something they completely oppose. And this is the identity crisis within Islam. And this is why I say to many of those peaceful Muslims who identify with Islam, and they could be in the hundreds of millions, who don't even know the Quran, who don't know the Islamic law, who don't know that they are actually required for physical and financial and social jihad. If they don't understand it, if they haven't gone to a Sharia school like I did, they go identifying because they think this is their ethnicity, but it's not. It's a label slapped on them. And I think in a moment where they have to choose between the higher interests of humanity or some identity given to them by their parents, they have to choose the higher interests of humanity. When I meet a Muslim, usually, as long as they haven't identified as a Muslim, I only see their individuality. I see a human being in front of me. And I am able to communicate with them on a personal level. Now, the moment they slap or they just raise the religious card, this is when I am concerned. This is when I don't trust that person. The only time when they identify as a Muslim. But if you really want to be a good person, you don't need actually to be anybody. You don't need the identity. You can just show me who you are through your practice, not through the theories that given to you, especially theories from the 7th century.
So here we, okay.
You know, Ahmad showed the entire world.
Okay.
Ahmad showed the entire world through practice.
So my
through
answer,
practice.
But if
who he is.
Mossad, if I was a Muslim listening to this, I'd say, okay, this guy used to be a Muslim, and he says we shouldn't identify as a Muslim. Okay. It's an argument, but you're a Christian convert. So my immediate response would be, if I was one of them, if I was a Muslim, I'd say, well, why do you identify as a Christian then? If you don't want people to be identified by religious labels, why did you convert to Christianity? Why do you call yourself a Christian? It's the same argument, it's just another religion.
Well, this is basically a label that is given to me. I don't identify. How many times we had conversations? I don't identify.
Well, let me ask you, are you a Christian?
I am influenced by the teachings of Yeshua. Okay? This is a very different thing. It inspired me, the principle of love thy enemy, of unconditional love, of forgiveness. So these were very important principles when I was finding my way out of Islam.
But are you a Christian or not?
But I didn't. But here, I don't identify as a Christian.
Okay.
Because what is Christian? What denomination? What book? What fellowship? If
somebody's born in Australia, they're an Australian. If somebody's born into Christ, they're a Christian.
I saw Jesus. Ya Allah, Jesus, forgive me, please. My brothers, my sisters,
please listen to me. That video from the hospital, it went everywhere. I know many of you are angry with me now. You send me words of hate. You say you will hurt my family. Please, I beg you by the name of God, do not touch them. They are innocent. They did not choose what I chose.
They branded him a traitor. They called him an apostate. But you need to stop and watch this man because he woke up in a Cairo hospital screaming the name of Jesus.
I saw him. I saw Jesus. Yallah, Jesus, forgive me. Forgive me, please. I am sorry. I am sorry. Please, please have mercy on me. I don't want to die like this. I don't want to die. Jesus, I repent.
He was begging the Savior for mercy. His family was horrified. His neighbors turned their backs. But Malik doesn't care. What Jesus showed him in that hospital room is worth losing everything for.
My brothers, my sisters, please listen to me. That video from the hospital, it went everywhere. I know many of you are angry with me now. You send me words of hate. You say you will hurt my family. Please, I beg you by the name of God, do not touch them. They are innocent. They did not choose what I chose.